Welcome to part 4 of the drawing process overview in Creo Parametric. In this video, we're going to cover 5 different topics: tables, supplemental geometry including center marks for holes and draft geometry, surface finishes, layers, and generating a PDF. And I'm going to create a manual table and also a smart table for the bill of materials. I'm going to pretend that I have a scenario where I'm going to have different part numbers based on the region because of export controls, so I need to create a table manually. To do that, I will go to the Table tab, and then from the Table command, I can choose the size of my table. And for this one, I need one with 2 columns and 5 rows, so I will highlight those blocks and then left-click, and then I can drag to place the table somewhere on my sheet. Now I'm going to resize the different columns. First, I'll start by selecting a column. I will move my mouse over the top cell and then tap the right mouse button. That highlights the row, and then I will tap one more time. That highlights the column. Now I will left-click, and in the mini toolbar, there is an icon for specifying the width. I will click on that, and I like to do it by the number of characters. Let's say I want 12 characters in this one. I will type in the value and then click OK. The table updates. Now I will repeat that process for the second column. I will move my mouse over the cell. I will tap right, and with the column highlighted, I will left click and then click on the icon for column width. And this one I want to be 15 characters. I'll enter that value and click the OK button, and it adjusts. My top row is going to be a header row, so I will choose the Merge Cells command, and I'll leave the default rows and columns, and I will select one cell, then select the second cell, and I'm going to repaint real quick just by zooming in and zooming out. You can see that we have a single merged cell. I will click the middle mouse button a couple of times to get out of the Merge Cells command, and now I can double click in the cell in order to place the text. Now I'll type in here Alt Part Numbers. And then if I left click on the screen once, that allows me to change the formatting. For example, I can center the text in this particular cell. Okay, let me double click in another cell. And for this one, I'm going to have the text region, and then I'll left click and then center justified. And by the way, you can set this justification before you do it, before you type in the text. Sometimes that's a lot easier for an entire row or a column. And then for the part number, in this I'll just type in part number. And then once again, set my justification. And then let's just enter in the rest of the text. So for example, in here, I will put in Africa, and then in the next region, let me double click in there and put in Europe. And then for the final cell, I'll type in Southeast Asia. And then for the part numbers, well, let me double click in the cells and enter in those different values. And in that way, I have filled in my table manually. Okay, so now let's take a look at using a predefined table, or what some people call a smart table. So I have an assembly on this drawing sheet. I want to create a bill of materials for this assembly. To place my bill of materials on the drawing, I will go to the Table dropdown and then Quick Tables. And here are a bunch of different tables that come from PTC. So for example, there's some cabling related ones. There's some ones from the old Legacy Pro diagram. There's one for manufacturing. But here for assembly, I can create a bill of materials going down or a bill of materials growing upward. I will go to the BOM description down, left click on it, and then specify the location where I want it to appear on the drawing, just with a left mouse click. And when I look at this table, it has a couple of columns that I do not want in here. So just like before, I can select the columns by tapping the right mouse button a couple of times in the cell, and then left click to select the column, and then I will choose to delete it. And it gives me a warning that, hey, deleting a table column that spans a repeat region cannot be undone. I am fine with that. Let's choose yes. And we also have a notes column in here. I'm going to leave that for now. but my first column is way too short. Let me tap right, and then when it highlights, I will left click to select it, and then go to column width, and let's crank up the number of characters to 20, and then click on the OK button. I see that my skeleton is listed in here. I can remove that from the repeat region. You can go to repeat region and it opens up the menu manager. Then you can choose to add a filter, and then I will pick the region. And there are two different ways that you can do it. You can write a rule, so I could automatically have all skeletons filtered out of here, but for the sake of expediency, I will use by item, where I will just choose the single item that I want removed, and then click OK and done, and it is out of there. Be aware that there are a bunch of other different attributes that you can change for the repeat region. For example, right now we have no duplicates, and it is flat. It's only reporting what is at the top level of the assembly. If you wanted to go down into all the individual components, you could choose recursive, and there's some other different options here for embedded components and also for cable information, like if you have any markers or tape in there. Let me choose done return and then done to get out of the menu manager. And since I have a bill of materials, I probably want some bill of material balloons appearing in this particular view. So I can go to the Create Balloons dropdown. You could just choose all and it'll choose which view to place it in, but I'm going to do it by view. I just want to make sure that all of them end up in this main general view. So we get the bomb balloons to appear. Looks like I need to do a little bit of moving around. Be aware that there is a cleanup utility. If you go to the selection filter in the lower right hand corner, you can choose bomb balloon. Just make sure that you're only selecting the bomb balloons, and then hold down the right mouse button. Here we have clean up bomb balloons, and you could specify how far they should be offset from the view outline. My view outline is pretty big, so I'm going to enter in 0.2, just reduce the value. You could specify a stagger value, and 0.6, I'll leave that. And then you could also choose to create the corresponding snap lines. So everything here looks good. I will choose the OK button, and it adjusted the position of some of the balloons, but my value is too low here. Let me just grab this and drag it out a little bit. And maybe I want to adjust some of the other different ones. So for example, this one, I can grab it and drag it down. And then I realize, hey, you know what? I'd rather have it attached at a different location. If you move your mouse over the arrow, there's that little icon that looks like a box with some horizontal lines in it. If you hold down the right mouse button, you can choose Edit Attachment, and I can choose, hey, I want it attached maybe over here instead. Let me hit the middle mouse button to get out of that and deselect, and I see that, oh, you know what, there are a few other changes that I might want to make. So for example, this one over here, let me drag it over there, and this one over here. Probably want to change the attachment of that one as well. Maybe move it over here, and then move my mouse over, and then edit attachment, put it, I don't know. What is it attached to? Let me just grab something over there. Okay, so that is good. And for the last one, it's sitting over there right on the border of the sheet. Might help in this case to go to the Layout tab, make sure that Lock View Movement is not selected, and then I can select on View. Once I make sure that everything is set to all, let me select on the view. Oh, looks like I'm still in the middle of another command. Let me select on the view and then drag the mouse over. That is good. Let me grab this little note and drag it over as well. All right, so that is good for my tables and my bill of materials and my balloons. Now let's add in some other different supplemental geometry. I'm going to start off by adding in some marks for the centers of some holes. And so the way that you do that, the easy way, is by going to the particular view that you want to add them to. And then from the Annotate tab, you can go to Show Model Annotations. We used this earlier for adding our different dimensions into views and geometric tolerances, stuff that comes from the model. The last tab is for your model datums, and I like to change the type from all just to axes when I'm adding in my center marks. And then I can select a view, and it's going to highlight all the different axes that appear in here, and I'm just going to select 4 of them manually. And as I pick them, you can see how they are selected in the Show Model Annotations dialog box. Those 4 are good, so I will click on the OK button. And you can see that all of them have these little white squares. Those are drag handles so that you can adjust the size. I'm not going to adjust the size of any of them, but also be aware that if you go to File and then Prepare, Drawing Properties, this opens up the dialog box that we saw earlier for changing our tolerancing standard. We can also click on the blue Change hyperlink for detail options. And there are a whole bunch of different options in here, roughly somewhere around the middle. There's a group of a few options for axes. Here we can see these options control axes, and one of the ones that you can change is the circle axis offset. You can control how far off of the different circles that your little dashed lines will appear. So you can change that if you want to. I'm just going to leave the default value. Let's click the close button and then close to get out of that one. Also in this particular view, I want to indicate an area where maybe I want the part to be marked or something like that. So I want to add in some additional geometry that does not appear in the part model. To add additional geometry, what's called draft geometry, you can go to the Sketch tab, and here we have the ability to create lines, arcs, rectangles, circles, and so forth. And be aware that these different commands have changed the way that they operate since about Creo 8 or so. If you're using Creo 7 or earlier, this might look a little different to you. I'm going to create a rectangle, and right now I can see where my point is going, and there are some dimensions on the screen. Right now these are being dimensioned from some 0 point located off of my sheet. I don't want to locate my point in a precise manner from that location, so I can change the dimension base point to another location using this icon. I'll click on that and I can change my base location to this point. And then you can start seeing that there's a point there with a couple dimensions. And if I leave my mouse still, it opens up a little window where I can change to a precise value. In this case, I want to use a value of 0.05 for that one and 0.05 for that one. And that is good. And so I will click and then I'm dragging out. And here it allows me to define the overall height and width of the rectangle. But in this particular case, I want to dimension it from the lower right-hand corner. And once again, if I leave my mouse still, it allows me to change the values for that length and width. But I don't want that. I want to choose maybe this dimension over here to, oh, actually not that one, to move it to the base sketch origin. I want to go back to this one over here. And then in this case, I want to dimension from there. And that way I can enter in the same values as before, 0.05 and 0.05, just so that it is evenly offset. So that's good. I'm going to get out of sketching by hitting the middle mouse button a couple times. And so now I've added in a rectangle onto the sheet. Be aware that this does not put the rectangle back in the model. This only appears on the drawing sheet. Do not use these sketching tools to cheat your drawing. That's a very bad practice. What I mean by that is sometimes people need to add a hole into the model and they say, oh, you know what? Rather than going back to the model and creating a hole feature, if I just sketch a circle right on here, well, it's going to look like a hole. This is a very bad practice. So I'm going to select that hole and then from the mini toolbar, or excuse me, select that circle and then delete it from the mini toolbar. You can add hatching to your different entities as well. And so I'm just going to swipe a box over the rectangle that I just sketched. And now the hatch fill command is available to me. It asks me for a name for the cross section here. I'm just going to call it my marking cross section. And then we have the Modify Hatching dialog box. You'll see that is using a default hatch pattern. There's another option here, a default option for the hatch cross-section. I don't like that one, so let's go back to the hatch pattern. There's also a retrieve command, and there are a bunch of different hatch patterns that are provided to you that you can select for ANSI or for ISO. Also, there is a way that you can modify these different hatches. For example, if I go to angle, I can specify an angle relative to the current angle. So for example, if I choose 90 degrees, there it is perpendicular to what it was before. 45 degrees, that ends up making it vertical. Let me go back to 0 for the initial value. I'm happy with that. Let's click on the Done button in order to complete that. All right, I am happy with my supplemental geometry on sheet 3. I'm now going to take a look at adding a surface finish. And let's add a surface finish over for this particular drawing view. To add a surface finish, you will go to the Annotate tab. Here is the Surface Finish command, and there's a gallery that you can choose, and you can see the standard ASME or ISO ones, and then we have generic, machined, unmachined. There is also the ability to browse manually through the different folders of options that you have. So for example, ASME. Here is the new standard ASME surface finish symbol that was added a couple versions ago. I'm going to go to the machined option, and there's one for no value and then a standard. And then with the standard, you can see that we have a preview of what the surface finish would look like. I would like to change the roughness, so I can go to the Surface Finish Customization tab, and I can change the value. Maybe I only need a value of 63, and then I can choose what it's going to be attached to. As I move out, you can see that we are getting the position of the surface finish symbol with an elbow. Let me hit the middle mouse button, and that way I have the surface finish placed on my drawing sheet. So that is most of the detailing that I want to accomplish in the drawing. One last thing that I like to do before I finish up my drawing is manage my layers. I'm going to go to sheet 1 to show you something. And I see, oh boy. I want to clean up my drawing using different layers, and so you can access your layers from the drawing tree from this icon. And before I go to that, you want to check out your options. If you go to the last icon in the layer tree, there's a command here for the drawing layer status, and then this opens up a dialog box. You want to use whatever your system administrators or CAD administrators have decided conforms to your company standards. And the default value is yes, it's going to display. The display status of common layers is controlled separately in the drawing. You could have the display status of layers controlled by the model instead. Most people don't want that. And then you can also, oops, let me move my mouse here. You can also control the display status of all layers separately in the drawing. And then there's an option to change the display of model layers in drawing mode only when the model layer name is the same as the drawing layer name. So just be aware of those different layer status controls. I'm going to cancel out of here. And a lot of times people just grab all the layers and hide them, but you want to be careful with that. I'm going to grab all the different layers here and then choose the hide button, and then I'm going to take a look at the screen. A lot of times I just zoom in and zoom out to repaint quickly. One of my components actually went away. This bomb balloon is pointing out to nothing. Be aware that layers can control the display of entire components. In this particular case, I would want the components layer to still be visible. And another thing to be aware of is this particular drawing has a layer for snap lines. Now all the snap lines are not visible. I might want those visible so that I can use them to adjust different things around. Remember that when you print out a drawing, the snap lines are automatically not going to be printed along with it. So now that I have controlled the display of various different datums for my drawing, they're not going to be affected by whatever controls that people use when they are adjusting them in the InGraphics toolbar. All right, I'm happy with my layer settings. Let me close the layer tree. Now with my layers all set, I'm ready to generate a PDF. The way that you do that is by going to the File drop-down menu and then Save As, and then we have the Quick Export, which will just generate a PDF file without making any changes. I typically go to the Export button just to make sure that I am getting what I want. And here we have the option to export to a PDF. And then here is the export command. And then when you do that, you will get your PDF file created. Let me choose to close the export setup. And so that is how you can generate your PDFs for your particular drawings.